Well, this week we've got two Shattered Robins and a Wonder Woman turning into a super mom. We'll see. I'm Peter Franson from christiangeekcentral.com and Spirit Blade Productions. Welcome to Essential Issues Weekly, where I talk about DC Comics 1 week after their release on the Ultra tier of the DC Universe Infinite subscription service. In each installment, I pick an assortment of comics to talk about as a DC fan and also explore what, if anything, they have to say about the essential issues of real life. Now, warning, full spoilers for everything I talk about. That's your first and only warning. Right now, we're taking a look at comics originally released to the Ultra tier on August 13th, 2025, originally published July 16th, 2025. First from that group, and I think I'm going to be pretty short here, is Superman Unlimited number 3, where we've got this reinvention of the Toyman, as it's revealed at the end of this issue, a toy man, created by the original Toyman, but instead of being villainous, he is an misunderstood hero who builds a giant robot that seems to be bent on destruction, but it was actually meant to be a kryptonite energy user or something like that. Anyway, what he says at the end was like, no, I was building this thing to show that kryptonite can be used to power all kinds of things, and now this kryptonite that's ended up on the Earth can be put to good use. And so it seems like maybe he's gonna, be a positive character. I don't know. We had one of those already. I believe it was an Asian kid in the pages of Superman Batman back in the day, who was kind of like another shot at reinventing Toyman. I don't know. I don't really have much invested in the concept of Toyman. I think the one time that I thought he was interesting was in a Jeff Johns story, and I don't even remember anything about that. So, but noticeably, we are still getting focus on crypto here with this Superman Unlimited comic. It does in some ways seem meant, well, it's part of the the Summer of Superman initiative. And so crypto has been showing up more in the comics. I think that's clearly meant to be a tie-in to the movie for those coming to the comics who may be expecting to see more crypto. So anyway, this one was fine, but I'm ready to move forward, and hopefully after the Summer of Superman is finished, we'll still have a new Superman monthly title that can do maybe some more interesting things than it's done so far, especially following up on the new power of Superman to kind of become temporarily invulnerable to kryptonite. I think there's a lot of changes, some status quo changes happening in Superman Unlimited, and unfortunately issue 3 didn't seem to be pushing those things forward or showing the ramifications of those things yet. It seemed like a very could be in almost any Superman story, in any Superman comic kind of thing. So I want to see further development of the status quo changes. Anyway, that's Superman Unlimited number 3. Nightwing number 128. This seems to be bringing us to the climax or close to it of this fifth dimensional imp invasion that's happening, that's taken over Titan's Tower. And I don't know, they go back and forth between these creepy Lovecraftian vibes and the really silly cartoony stuff that fifth dimensional imps are known for. And I would rather they just reinvent the concept so they're not silly and cartoony, but that's just an aesthetic preference, a tonal preference on my part. So not really feeling anything about this story. They do bring back the original concept of Nightwing that was originally in a Superman comic, and it was a character from Kandor, the bottled city of Kandor. And I'm trying to remember if the very first Nightwing was actually, I think it was Jimmy Olsen wearing rocket belt or something. I don't know. Anyway, they try to kind of make some connective tissue back to that idea, but ultimately it's happening in the fifth dimension, which is kind of being treated like a dream world. And so at the end of the day, when it's all dreamy-ish and some cartooniness going on, I'm like, is any of this going to matter when all is said and done? It feels like a story that doesn't really matter and isn't going to matter when it's all done. So I'm just flipping through it, ready to see the end of it. But that's Nightwing 128. Then we've got Batman and Robin, Year 1, number 9. And I'm warming up to this series more and more. I might eventually want to go back when it's all published and just read the whole run. But the art style really, once again, is evocative of the original year one story, Batman's origin story. But now we're really focusing on Dick Grayson and him becoming Robin, his first months or year as Robin. And this issue touches on the grief of losing his parents and how he's never really given himself over to the mourning process. And finally, he has this really touching moment with Alfred where he breaks down because Alfred is like, "Why have I not seen you mourn? Talk to me about this, please." Alfred says, "In all these months, I've not once seen you truly mourn your parents' murder. Why is that?" And there's a moment of silence. He once more says, "Talk to me." And finally, Dick breaks and in tears and with angry eyes turns and says, "Because performers don't cry." And then he just totally dissolves into Alfred's arms. And it's really a beautiful moment I found very touching. And I think that all of us can relate to some degree, that even if we don't come from a performance background, I do, I mean, not the circus, but but even if we don't come from a performance background, there is a sense in which we go about our days feeling like we kind of have to hold things together, and many times it's appropriate. It's not always appropriate to express every moment at every time. So, but at the same time, in an unhealthy way, we can refuse to give expression to things that in their appropriate time we do need to give expression to, because we're just kind of putting on a front, especially in this social media age, when we're putting our best front out there, whether we mean to or not, on social media. There's a lot of performing that we end up doing, and there's a lack of authenticity in our relationships that can result from that. And so I thought that, despite him coming from this background of the circus, this is kind of a universal idea that, like, performers don't cry, and we are, and likewise, we are hesitant to really open up about what we're feeling at times. So once again, that's Batman and Robin, Year 1, number 9. Then we've got another Robin story, Robin and Batman, it must be said, Jason Todd, number 2. And I'm warming up a little bit to the art style in this. It seems to be painted on some kind of a textured canvas, and it's, at first I was like, that feels a little bit pretentious, or like we're trying to be fancy and stuff. I don't know. I think I either warmed up to it or I just accepted it. It wasn't as much of an issue for me this time around, and I did start to really focus in on the story. And it was interesting this month to read Batman and Robin, Year 1, number 9, back to back with Robin and Batman, Jason Todd, number 2, because both of these books are really kind of dealing with these young boys, these young Robins in their first 6 months or year as Robin, and just how they are coping with their loss in different ways. And Jason Todd is at odds with Batman, and he's just got a harder edge than, well, in some cases, than even Batman, because Batman in this comic book has a conversation with Alfred where he says basically, me and Dick both had parents that loved us at one point. And so we have the memory of what it's like to be in that kind of home, but Jason doesn't have that. And I'm trying to provide that. I was hoping that we could, meaning Bruce and Alfred, could provide that for him and sort of fix him. And that language of being fixed versus being broken is used in this issue, and I'm wondering where it's going to go. Because I think that in the way that the word broken is often used in popular entertainment fiction, it's a bad thing, and we don't want to be thought of as broken. And I think that the reason that we don't like that is because of our natural tendency to equate our worth, our value, our significance with our functionality, with our ability to produce. And so there's some of that language going on in here where Jason, in his internal monologue, is talking about being broken, and he's just kind of given over to that. But he also kind of throws the word worthless into the mix as well, as he's kind of like thinking about himself. So I'm really wondering how that's going to play out and what the writing might have to say on the topic of brokenness, because there is a way in which it's very good for us to be broken, specifically in the sense that being broken allows us to see ourselves more accurately. And certainly that depends on the sense in which we mean broken. But like I was talking about before, we have this tendency to want to keep up appearances, put up our best front, and kind of hold ourselves together, keep it held together. And I think in that sense, we definitely don't want to be broken. But sometimes we need to be broken in a sense and realize, I can't hold it together. I do fall short. I am a mess in some very significant ways. But then at the same time, it's important in those moments, it's very freeing in those moments to recognize the grace that God gives to us, which means undeserved favor, favor that we did not earn, that we do not deserve, that He just, in His kindness, gives us anyway. Why? Because He loves us. In His eyes, as our Creator, we have tremendous value that is completely unaffected by the fact that we are a broken, hot mess. So, hard to say at this point what they might be cooking up thematically, but I took note of the words broken, of the word fix, of the word worthless, and I'm curious to see if those ideas might be developed into a theme of some kind. Very early at this point to say, that was Robin and Batman, Jason Todd, number 2. Then finally, we've got Wonder Woman number 23. Not much to say about this. There's a weird scene in which we're seeing these people living in a world that's kind of like, I don't know, run by mice, or they use mice to tug their cars around. It seems completely bonkers. And the only thing that people say over and over again is like the mouse man knows. Mice have ears and the mouse man knows. And they just say those two sentences over and over again in different ways. That is their entire language. They emphasize different words at different times that apparently are communicating different things as a result, but those are the only words that they speak. And I'm like, is this some kind of cracked out dream that someone is having? What is going on? Well, we eventually find out in the story that this is some kind of a country, a nation, a people that have segregated themselves willingly from the rest of the world. They have isolated themselves from any kind of communication with the rest of the world, and now Wonder Woman has reason to go there and briefly interacts with this girl whose story, quote unquote, we were following with all the weird babbling about mice and stuff like that. And suddenly Wonder Woman shows up. She's the only one that's speaking full sentences, is kind of rescuing this girl. And as the cover of Wonder Woman 23 shows, Wonder Woman has her baby strapped to her back. And that is perhaps the most striking image. It's a weird issue. I don't know if I'm going to like this story arc at all. As I said last time when they had kind of the prologue involving this weird mouse man kind of guy, I was like, I am not into it. I'm not into mice talking or being anthropomorphic. If that's where this is going, I'm out. But the whole theme of mice seems to be handled in a more creepy way in 23, and so I'm leaving room for the possibility that I will like this story. We'll see. But the striking image of Wonder Woman walking around with her baby on her back, I find very interesting. You know, the last big long story arc that I thought went on too long, that Tom King wrote, ended up being a big kind of treatise related to feminist types of issues, and the misuse of male authority. And in this issue, I'm wondering if what they're setting up is some kind of commentary on motherhood. If I look at this image on Wonder Woman 23, it seems intended to evoke the idea that women can be strong, because boy, Wonder Woman is muscled out in the way that I like to see that character drawn. But she's got this delicate baby. There's a sense of nurturing. At the same time, she's wearing it on her back. So I don't know exactly how nurturing she's being, so much as maybe putting up with and realizing she has to drag her kid along with her. I don't know. We're going to have to see how her nurturing personality plays out, how effective it is. I would love to see her wrestle with that. I would love to see her grow in that area. That would be neat for her to not be fully realized and just kind of like already starting out as a great mother. I think that's where we've seen a lot of female led stories go wrong, is that they just start out fully developed and they have nowhere to go. I like the idea that Wonder Woman starts out as a warrior, and maybe 23 is going to, oh man, this would be such a cool thing. If 23, the image on 23, would be bookended by a final image in this story arc in which the baby is not being worn on her back, but is being worn in front of her, and she is in a more active way loving and nurturing and being affectionate toward her baby. I think that would be really cool. I think there's a beautiful image of a godly woman in Proverbs 31. I won't read it right now, but it really has both of those elements. It has what we would consider the quote-unquote traditional elements of a wife who's providing for her family, who's making food, making clothes, things like that, but also who is a wise, savvy businesswoman who's going out evaluating land and purchasing land, and so I'm wondering if in the pages of Wonder Woman, we will see a more rounded version of Wonder Woman in the context of motherhood. I think there's a lot of things that could be said, and certainly there's some wrong things that could be said. But we will see. This is just the first issue in a new story arc. Again, that's Wonder Woman 23. My ring selection this week is the black ring, which I use to not describe like total distaste for what I'm reading, but just kind of like, meh. It's not really a blip on the radar. It's not like a spike on the heart monitor. It's just kind of a flat line. Whatever. Yeah, these were some comics, and I read them, and I didn't hate them, and I didn't love them. They were just very much there. So that's how I felt about comics this week. Heads up, next week I will be taking the week off from Essential Issues. I'm dedicating the week to some long-term projects that I want to make some concentrated progress on, but I do plan to catch up the following week and cover 2 weeks worth of comics at that time. So anyway, just so you know what is coming up, and I think those are all of my thoughts on comic books for now. As always, love getting your thoughts and reactions in the comments below. I don't know if you knew this, you can get this content as a monthly podcast, collecting all of these installments into just one episode per month. It's called the Essential Issues Podcast, Essential Issues, a DC Comics podcast. You can get that on podcast services. If it's not on your favorite, let me know, and I'll try to get it on there. There's also a ton of other content made for you at christiangeekcentral.com. Hope you'll check that out soon as we endeavor to geek out and seek the truth. For more chat about geek entertainment, answers to your questions, and news from the wider world of Christian geekery, get the Christian Geek Central podcast today on iTunes and other podcast services.